The new Syracuse University AD is very familiar with programming, TV rights, with university athletic commissioners and conferences, the major professional leagues, football, bowl events, and the highly watched Sports Center, where we all watch to get our daily dose of sports news. Somehow, the stars were aligned, and Syracuse gets blessed with just the right person to lead the Orange and the Qs. So that level of achievement that not only do the loyal fans here in Central New York dream about, even pay, catch those bills, wish for, and John Wildhack is that right person. Please, a warm, sunny June welcoming to Syracuse University's Athletic Director, John Wildhack. Freshly made this morning.
Oh, the jam.
It's jam.
I'll enjoy that.
Spread it around.
That's for sure.
You know, using the same word, spread. You know there's a betting term called spread?
I do, Louis, from my previous life at ESPN. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to see everybody here today. I appreciate you coming out on this June day. And I'll start with a little bit about my background. As Louis said, I'm a native of Buffalo, New York. I remain a long-suffering Bills fan. It's only been 17 years and counting since they made the playoffs, but you know, just a number. But I came to Syracuse and I followed in the footsteps of most of my family. My dad did his undergrad work, his pre-med work here during the World War II years, and then went to University of Buffalo Med School. My oldest sister went here, my older brother went here. My two nephews are recent graduates, one in 2011 from the Whitman School, and the other, Sean, 2015 from the Falk School, and they're both gainfully employed to the delight of my brother and my sister-in-law. One's at Wall Street, the other's at the PGA Tour in Ponte Vedra, Florida, in the marketing department. And I have three sons, one who's 26 who lives in Connecticut, Tommy, who will turn 14 August 1st, and he's already committed to Syracuse, and he committed about 3 years ago. He knows more about Syracuse athletics and Syracuse sports than anybody. He's amazing. And then James, who will turn 13 in December. I'm not sure where James will go to school. He's a little bit more creative than Tommy in that respect. But we're as a family, we're delighted, really delighted to be back in this community. And the community has been incredibly welcoming and gracious to not only me, but to my wife Amy and my two sons. And we thought long and hard before we made the move, because we loved Connecticut. My wife's family, they're all in Connecticut, so the move was toughest on her. But we decided and we voted as a family, and I told the chancellor, I said, it has to be a unanimous vote. If it's not 4-0, we're not going to make the move. And I told my wife and kids that. But we're delighted to be here, and it's a great community. We love the town, we love the city, we love the surrounding areas. There's so much to do here, from a recreational, cultural, arts, entertainment. I call it a really good sneaky town in terms of restaurants. There's a lot of great, really sneaky restaurants in this town. So we're delighted and thrilled to be here. And I've been asked a few times, how committed am I to Syracuse? And I think the best way to answer that is we're building a house. So we're committed, and I know that if I ever told my wife and kids that I was thinking about making another move, they would disown me. So we're here to stay, and I'm here to, as long as the chancellor wants me to, but we're delighted to be here. In terms of the athletic department overall, we have 600 student athletes, and they're really, really great young men and women. And the most enjoyable part of my job, and I enjoy every aspect of my job, but the best time is when I get to interact with our student athletes. and they are to a person. They're committed academically, they're committed athletically. The time that they give between practice, training, academics, I mean, the regimen that they go through, they have to be so disciplined. And to spend time with those kids is great. And probably the one single athlete I've gotten to know best is Zaire Franklin, who's our middle linebacker, starting middle linebacker. He'll be a senior this year. He's going to graduate in 3.5 years with 2 degrees. He is third team All-State ACC last year. He is an outstanding player. He's a great kid. And Zaire and I, we get together kind of every 2 or 3 weeks, and we don't talk that much about football. We talk a lot about life, about the business world. He's asked me for advice in terms of leadership, et cetera, that type of thing. And he's a sponge. He's an absolute sponge. He just takes everything in and he retains it. And to have somebody like that who excels as he does on the football field, but also excels academically, graduating in 3.5 years, that's the type of young person you want to be around. And whenever I get done talking to Zaire, I'll send Amy and Tommy and James an email. Just had the best part of my day. Just had a half hour with Zaire. And he's just an example of the type of kid that we have at Syracuse. And one of the things that we stress in the mission statement for our department is to create and foster a culture of academic and athletic success to prepare our student athletes to be leaders in a global society. And it's really important that it's the academic and the athletics. It's more than words on a piece of paper. It's something we really live by. And I'll give you an example. Our cumulative GPA for our 600 student athletes in spring semester was a 3.08. I mean, that's pretty darn good. And we've got a lot of kids that are taking a very, very aggressive academic schedule. You know, one that if I ever tried to take as an undergrad, I never would have made it. But these kids are just incredibly bright and they're incredibly driven. I think they're great representatives of our university and they're great representatives of our community. Competitively, we're in the ACC, which is arguably as good a conference as there is in the country. We won the national championship in football this year at Clemson. We won the national championship in basketball at North Carolina. We competed obviously at a very, very high level in lacrosse and a number of sports. So we're in a great conference, and I think that's a positive for us because I think young people and I think coaches, you want to compete against the best and you want to coach against the best. And I think that's a motivating factor. And I can tell you, we've now been a member of the ACC for 4 years, and when I go to a conference meeting, Syracuse is a very, very highly regarded member of the ACC. You know, we have earned their respect. They've given that respect back to us, and we are a full and important member of the ACC. But I think it's great to compete in a conference as deep as that. If I had my druthers, I'm not sure I'd be in the same division in football as Florida State and Clemson. Occasionally I ask one of the other ADs who's in the other conference, like, other division, like, you want to swap divisions? You want to trade places? I don't have any takers yet, but that's okay. Again, I think it's great to compete against the best. We had a good year this past year. I think highlighted by some of our Olympic sports, cross country, finished 3rd nationally. Our rowing teams, both men top 10, women top 15. Women's basketball had another strong season. The NCAA selection committee didn't do us any favors when they put us at Connecticut for the 2nd round. I thought we were better than an 8 seed, and I told our good friends at the ACC in Indianapolis that when I was there a couple of weeks ago. You know, men's basketball is a roller coaster of a year, and the one thing I will tell you is it was amazing to watch how hard the coaching staff worked with that team to get every ounce of ability out of that team. And there was a lot of individual talent, and they just had trouble meshing that talent. And eventually when they did, they had a good ACC season. We probably needed one more win to make the NCAA tournament. We were either the first team left out or the second team left out of the tournament. And we needed one more win. That would have done that. Football, I'm incredibly excited about our future. It will take time to turn the football program around. I tell people, I said, turning around a football program is like turning around an aircraft carrier. It takes time. Coach Babers he is awesome to work with. He's been an absolute joy. I believe in his philosophy. I believe in his ability to motivate young people. I believe in his coaching philosophy. I think the fact that he has a defined philosophy, he can recruit to that, and I think he's doing that. We've upgraded the level of recruit that we're going after. We've given him more support in areas in football administration in terms of the recruiting area. We hired a director of player personnel whose sole job is to work with the assistant coaches and the recruiting coordinators to evaluate film of high school seniors, juniors, and sophomores. So I think we're being much more aggressive in terms of trying to connect with a higher level, higher caliber player. We had a camp this past Sunday. We had 169 high school football players on our campus, and a number of them are very, very highly rated prospects, and they have Syracuse on their list. So I think we've created some momentum. I think the style of play is certainly, if you're a quarterback, if you're a wide receiver, skill player, and you look at the up-tempo offense that Coach Babers run, and you look at where we play in a dome where the weather conditions are perfect, that's going to be appealing to you. Our defense last year was the youngest in the country. We returned 20 of 22 starters overall this year, so I'm optimistic about the 2017 season. But I'm also a realist. Our road schedule is brutal. We have the pleasure of playing at, and I have pleasure in quotes, we have the pleasure of playing at Florida State, at Miami, at Louisville, and at LSU. And no, I did not make that schedule up. And I did not schedule the LSU series. And we've got a really good home schedule, highlighted by Clemson on Friday, October 13th. That's a primetime game, 7 o'clock on ESPN. And then we have Pittsburgh and Boston College, two traditional rivals. Wake Forest, who beat us down there last year, kept us going from a bowl game. And then we've got three in a row to start the season against Central Connecticut State, Middle Tennessee State, who don't be fooled. There's talent on that team. I was talking to Dino the other day, and he said, John, their quarterback's an NFL quarterback. He said they got some players on that team. And then Central Michigan. So we've got a shot to get out of the gate quick, and we need to do that. But it's very simple. Our goal is we're guaranteed to play 12 games, and let's play well enough in those 12 that we get to play a 13th in a bowl game. And if we could do that, that would really be an achievement for this team, and I think really propel the momentum that the program feels going forward. Our lacrosse programs, we had terrific regular seasons. The postseason, it was, it's obviously there can only be one champion, and the women's team, they ran into a red-hot Boston College team that ultimately they beat us in the second round and made it all the way to the championship game, and they got on a great roll. And the men's team, we lost in the quarterfinals to Towson State, and we had a bad first quarter. We fell behind 6-0. We rallied. Their goalie played tremendous. They played very disciplined, both defensively and offensively, and went on to beat us, and they were one goal away from making the championship game. The one thing that's interesting about lacrosse is the depth in that sport has increased dramatically, and it's a national sport. 10, 15 years ago, the majority of lacrosse players came from Central New York, Long Island, and kind of the Baltimore area. But now it's exploded in Texas, Colorado, California, Florida, Georgia, so it's really become a national sport. Not that many schools have added lacrosse, so the available pool of talent has grown exponentially, but the number of programs is pretty much the same. So there's very little difference between the lacrosse team, who's a top 5 team, and one who's ranked between 15th and 20th. There's great parity in the sport. And I think we proved that throughout the year because we had 8 one-goal games. We did spend longer than anybody else ranked as the #1 team in the regular season, but obviously the goal is always to get to the Final Four. And if you get to the Final Four, then you want to win those 2 to bring home a national championship. Our cross-country team finished 3rd. Justin Knight finished 2nd individually in the NCAA cross-country championship. And then the recently competed NCAA Outdoor Track and Field Championships, he finished 2nd in the 5,000 meters. And that was a disappointment for him. And that just shows, you know, what a great year that he's had. But he's also, I mentioned the great young people. Justin's another one. He is the nicest, he's just the nicest kid you'd ever want to meet in your life. And again, when when you're around young people like that, you really root for them. And the worst part of my job is when we don't win, I feel for our players, our student athletes, I feel for our coaches, and I feel for our fans. In terms of our fans, I think we've got an incredible fan base. Basketball, we hosted Duke on a Wednesday night in February and had over 30,000 people. I mean, that doesn't happen anyplace else but here in Syracuse, New York, in the Carrier Dome. And then we came back in a week and a half later for our final home game against Georgia Tech, and we had another 30,000 people on a Saturday afternoon. So the passion and the support is immense. And we're getting there with football. It's going to take time. We've got to deliver a winning product, but I invite and I hope if you aren't season ticket holders or if you don't have individual game tickets yet, I hope you'll come out and support Coach Babers and his team. We will be entertaining and we'll be more competitive. And I always tell him, I said, I came back as an alumni when we were in the midst of some of our glory years and the dome was packed. And I said, Dino, when we have a sold out Carrier Dome, that is as good a home field advantage as there is in the sport of college football. It is deafening and really, really hard for the other team to play and compete in that environment. And that's what we want to build and get to. And I think we will. The university, I work for a great leader, Chancellor Severud. He's got a great vision for the overall university. He understands the importance of athletics. He's supportive of athletics. His senior team has been incredibly gracious to me. They're fun to work with. We work he demands a collaborative style, which is exactly the culture that I came from ESPN and what I've established in athletics, so it dovetails perfectly. So we're just, we're thrilled and excited to be here. And I think we are on the cusp here of having a really tremendous run in terms of our athletic and academic performance in the ACC. There's a lot of things that are in place, and we've worked very quietly in areas that we needed to upgrade or invest in or add additional support. We've done that, and that'll pay dividends. And it's the way we want to operate. I prefer to kind of operate under the radar a little bit. We're not going to put out a press release every week, but we're just going to work as hard as we can and work with our coaches. And we have a great set of coaches. They're very collaborative, which is unusual in Division I athletics, where your coaches are collaborative. And I really give Coach Boeheim a lot of credit for that, because he is supportive of every other coach. He's supportive of Coach Babers, both lacrosse programs. The first week I'm in the office, he and I are walking down, and Chris Fox, our cross country and track coach, walks by, and Jim says, best cross country coach in the country, John. And Jim's a legend, so he could very easily just say, you know what, I'm going to run my program and everybody else fend for themselves. He's the opposite, and I think that's really created a pretty unique culture amongst our head coaches. So we look forward to it. We know and we take great pride that we represent the community. I tell people at its heart, this is a college town at its heart, which I love. There's nothing more, there's nothing more dynamic, there's nothing more passionate than being part of a college town. And our goal is to represent all of you in the community in the best ways that we can, both on the field and off the field. So I am, with that, I am happy to take any and all questions that anybody may have. Yes, sir.
Do you have any plans to add or drop any varsity sports programs?
No plans to drop, and no plans to add right now. My number one priority is let's fix football. Let's get football good again. Because if we do that, not only the athletic department, the entire university will benefit. So that's really where I've spent the majority of my time, because that's the greatest challenge, but it's also the greatest opportunity. Yes?
What surprised you the most when you got to that first month over there on the
Fortunately, there really hasn't been that oh my gosh moment yet. Part of that is at ESPN I worked very closely with our conference partners. I got to know a lot of the athletic directors around the country personally, conference commissioners personally. I knew a lot of people here in the athletic department. I'd stayed connected to the university. I'm on the advisory board of the Falk School. Stayed close to Newhouse, stayed close to athletics. So there really wasn't anything. It's like, oh my God, this has been a total surprise. What I do love is just the passion that's in the place and the energy. And when you're around a college campus, you're around 600 young people like that. That just permeates the entire atmosphere. I think in terms of the difference coming from ESPN and obviously the public sector, and we're part of Disney, and obviously Disney's a publicly traded company, so it had a distinct and unique culture, and every organization does. And Syracuse has a unique culture as well. And what I needed to do is make the adjustment. Okay, this is just not about, all right, what's our quarterly results? What's our annual results? What's Wall Street saying about the stock today? What's Wall Street saying about ESPN today? In some ways, I think this is a better defined job for me than my previous job. My previous job, I oversaw 2,500 employees plus another 2,000 freelancers, domestic and international. So in that job, there are a lot of oh my gosh moments. If you get up in the morning and there'd be a call, okay, Buenos Aires, the facility's down. Well, that's not good. So this is a little better defined, but I think the one thing I did when I got here is I reached out to every dean individually to meet with them with a very simple message: is athletics wants to be seen as a good partner. A great example is that what we've done with the Falk School. We're working with them on a nutrition plan that's part of their academic curriculum that benefits our student athletes. In their marketing area, we had one of their classes create a marketing plan for women's basketball, and I need to mention women's basketball for a second. My staff and I, back in December, we identified the Notre Dame home game in February. We said, let's really get behind this, and the game was nationally televised on ESPN2, and I asked the question. I said, what's our largest crowd for women's basketball home game? 4,300 against Connecticut 5-6 years ago. I said, well, our goal is let's break it. So we marketed it. We went to our marketing partners. We went to business leaders throughout the community. We went to women business leaders throughout the community. 11,035 people showed up in the Dome that day. We lost by 3. We had a last second shot that rimmed out, but our kids played great. They were not intimidated by the big stage or by the crowd at all. It was a really well-played game, and it was a great experience for our kids. And just talking to Brittany Sykes and Alexis Peterson a couple days after that, and the kids will call me Mr. W. Mr. W, that was so cool. I mean, that crowd was awesome. That energized us. And that's an example of what this community does that I'm not sure anyplace else could do that. In the back.
What is the current status of Coach Boeheim's retirement?
Jim will be coaching for years to come. He's the youngest 72-year-old I've ever met. When Mike left, and Mike and I had developed we knew each other before I got here. We developed a very, very close relationship, and when Mike informed me he was leaving for Washington, he was incredibly gracious in the conversation that we had. And I immediately went to the chancellor and I went to a couple board members and I said, you know, the best thing we can do is let's extend Jim. We have somebody who, by the way, is a Hall of Famer. And he was won a lot of games. I can't say how many because otherwise we all know. They're really good at math in this town. I learned that in a hurry. Really good at math, particularly round numbers. And we also, Adrian Autry and Jerry McNamara were also being pursued by other programs. So we moved quickly to retain Jim, retain Jerry, retain Adrian. We brought Alan Griffin in, who played here. I interviewed Alan. I was really impressed. He's been at Dayton the last 7 years under Archie Miller. They built a very, very successful program at Dayton. And one of the things I like about it is Dayton's not necessarily going to attract, you know, the highest caliber, the 4 or 5 star recruit. Yet they won. So Alan can identify talent and develop talent. So, you know, I anticipate Jim will be here as long as we have success and that he's in good health. Well, I think one of the great values that any student athlete receives is a Syracuse education and a scholarship, and that in itself is of very significant value. And I think that education and what I've seen in meeting some of our recent alumni who were student athletes and what they've accomplished and how they've leveraged, you know, that Syracuse degree to jumpstart their career. So I think there's great value there. There's kind of ongoing litigation, and I think that's going to be part of the narrative, you know, for years to come. But I am not in favor of paying players. We have the NCAA did implement a few years ago back cost of attendance, which allowed for a larger stipend for players. The NCAA has made moves and the right moves where families can be paid. You can travel your family if you make the college football playoff. The NCAA Final Four is both our teams did last year. So I think there's a little bit more, you know, I think there's a little more common sense approach from the NCAA in terms of how we can benefit the student athletes. Well, I think one of the things that we try and do is and we're fortunate to be in the ACC, which is one of the Power 5 conferences, and our media rights agreement is a very important element of our revenue pool is to where we can take our revenues and invest those back in the enterprise that will benefit our student athletes. And whether it's technology, we've invested in some technology we use for both men's and women's basketball this year. In practices, we could put sensors on them and we could get literally real-time readout on how much stress, how much exertion they were on certain limbs, certain areas of their body. And to me, that's all about injury prevention. And you can go to a coach and say, you know what, we ought to back off so-and-so, or somebody's coming back from injury, you know what, they're good to go. So I think you've got to invest back in the enterprise. Clearly, the headline in terms of the excess is coaches' salaries. When you see something, you know, when you see Harbaugh's salary at Michigan or Saban's salary at Alabama, you know, there's a hue and cry to that. At the same time, if you look at the revenue that Alabama generates, football generates, it generates close to $100 million. Well, all right, so you're paying your coach, you know, $9 or $10 million. If you sit there, you say that, you know, if you do the math, that's a pretty good investment. So to me, it's just, you know, the economics, it's part of the enterprise of the Power 5, and you need to deal with it in an appropriate way. And again, I think one of the things we try to do is where we can invest back to benefit our student athletes in any way whatsoever.
Are football and basketball supporting the minor sports, so-called minor sports?
Yeah, I mean, the model for almost every school is your real revenue generators are football and basketball. And they do, and along with the media money, that supports your Olympic sports. We've got, well, the question I probably get asked the most often is the Dome, and we're hard at work doing our due diligence. It's going to be an incredibly complicated project. It's the only facility in the country of a Power 5 conference that plays host to 5 different teams. Football, both basketball programs, both lacrosse programs. So that facility is being used from September 1st until, you know, into April, into May. Then there's a plethora of university events in the Dome as well, more than just graduation and convocation. So the use that building gets is relatively amazing. And Pete Sala and his staff they are fantastic. They are operationally, they are the best facility people in the country, I think, bar none, college or pro. So we're in the process of doing our due diligence. The most important thing is we got to get this right. And one of the things that I've stressed, people I've met with and people I've spoken to within the university system is we need to upgrade our fan amenities and the fan experience. And I think that starts really from the time you leave your home until you get back home. And you know, that's an area through my work at ESPN, was fortunate enough to get to know a lot of NFL owners. I've talked to them, kind of tapped their brains, their brain power, and we've got to create, when we renovate, we've got to create a better game day experience for all our fans, from your highest end fan to our loyal season ticket holder who sat up high in the 300s for 36 years. We've got to provide a better experience for all, and I will evangelize that. Yes, sir.
So often our favorite freshmen and sophomores in basketball jump to the NBA. Is that part of the culture these days and going forward, or do you see any possible ways that that might change and that the kids might hang around for 4 years and graduate?
I think it's part of the culture. I think that's unfortunate. I think to change that, the NBA and the NBA Players Association would need to modify their collective bargaining agreement. I think if there's a young man graduates high school and he doesn't want to go to college, but he wants to go in the NBA D League or play internationally, or he's good enough to play in the NBA, I think he should be allowed to do that. I think once you commit to playing college, I think you should be. I like the baseball rule. If you're going to play, you play for 3 years, because the constant turnover that you see in college basketball with the one and dones, it's not healthy for the sport, and I don't think it's healthy for college basketball, and it's not healthy for the NBA, because these kids, they're not physically, mentally ready to go play 82 NBA games against the best players in the world. So I hope at some point common sense will prevail. Adam Silver did come out a couple weeks ago saying it's something he wants to try to address with Michelle Roberts, who's the president of the NBAPA. Yes, sir.
Is there any comment that you can make, John, relative to Louisville's recent NCAA penalties?
Yeah, I like everybody else. I read the report and stayed up on the story, but I'm going to stay out of Louisville's business or any other school's business, because they know the details. I don't. My job is to take care and represent Syracuse the right way. Because we get an allotment of games, an allotment of tickets, particularly for away football games. That's a generous allotment. Basketball, it's tighter. It's tighter in terms of what we provide schools and vice versa. And Duke, I don't even know what's the exact number, but I guess if it's 20, that's probably a lot for a place like Duke. Louisville, it's a little bit more, but it's a much tougher ticket away basketball than it is away football. Yes, sir.
John, to change the subject just a little bit, you spent a lot of years at ESPN, and these days ESPN is supposed to be struggling a bit. What do you see as their future or the direction that they're moving in?
I think their future still is incredibly bright. ESPN really drove the growth of Disney and Disney stock for 10 years. And is still an incredibly profitable company. The growth rate has slowed. So when the growth rate slows, that's when Wall Street begins to be critical and to look at you with a critical eye. They've made moves to try to rein in costs and contain their costs. But I think their overall portfolio of rights that they have is the right set. They're very aggressive in the digital space. I think just the power of sports, and particularly live sports content, is only going to continue to increase in value to advertisers, to distributors. So I think there's been an overreaction that ESPN is a company that's in decline. It's not. The growth rate has slowed, and like any other media company, we're in a period of disruption, and that disruption is caused by technology. And I think they're smart enough to figure their way and navigate their way through that, so that they'll emerge as the continued leader on the other side.
Do you see ESPNs and the Foxes and the NBC now coming back, drawing back on the rights fees or what they're willing to pay? And how do those things impact the conference?
I don't think, it all depends on the market. Is all you need is, if we're gonna sell a package of football and basketball games and you've got 2 or 3 interested bidders, then you're gonna do really well. So I don't think, now our deal, the ACC deal with ESPN goes through 2036. So we know where we're gonna be for a long time. And there's escalators in that deal, and we're gonna launch the ACC network in August of 2019, where if that's a success, that'll help us on the revenue front as well. So I think the ACC is well positioned. I think college sports will continue to do well. There's a top tier. The NFL, college football, the NBA, Major League Baseball, NCAA men's basketball. Those sports, when they go to market, they'll continue to do very well just because of the audiences that they draw. That tier underneath them, those are the properties that if I was overseeing, those are the ones I'd be worried about. Because you've only got so much to spend, and if you're going to spend it on the NFL, then I may not have as much left for the PGA Tour, or I may not have as much left for the U.S. Open tennis tournament. Yes, sir.
What can you tell us about the replacement of the dome?
It'll be a renovation, and we're hard at work on it. And it's, again, it's incredibly complicated because we've got to do it in a way that we don't lose a football season, a basketball season, a lacrosse home season. It's just the nature of that building makes it, in the use that building receives, makes it very, very complex. And we've got to take the time to make sure that we do our due diligence and get it right. And that ultimately, when we present something to the chancellor and the board, it's something that we feel that addresses a long-term need. And as I said earlier, also addresses the fan experience inside the dome. And yes, air conditioning seal, front and center. It'd be really, really, really difficult to increase capacity. You'd have to, and the last thing I am is an engineer, but you'd have to actually, where are you going to build on? You'd have to go. You'd have to build up. And I think you've got to understand kind of where you are in the market that you're in is ultimately, I think if we get good, and when we get good, not if, when we get good in football, I think if you look back at our record, having a capacity of around 50,000 works well for this market, and I'd much rather have that and have a better fan experience. And you're actually starting to see some venues now pull back on some of their seating. Gillette Stadium, the Patriots did that. They took here's a team that's at the height of their success, and they actually took about 2,000 seats out because I think you're seeing more and more schools and arenas that built these massive complexes. They're concerned about, is there going to be the demand there to fill them up, particularly when the television experience at home is dramatically better than it was 10 or 15 years ago. So I think we're right-sized at this point. I think the revenue opportunities we look at, the ACC network is clearly one of them, and I don't think that'll be a significant source of revenue out of the gate. But if ESPN has success in getting that network distributed, and I think they'll put their shoulder behind it, then down the road, then the ACC network can be a nice addition to our revenue stream. The other areas that every school looks at is your apparel deal. We're a long-term partner with Nike. Our deal expires in 2019. There's robust competition in that space from Under Armour and from Adidas, who's now really made an effort to get back into North America and is willing to invest in college sports. And then your multimedia marketing rights, which is kind of all your shoulder programming around the live games. Our incumbents, IMG, they've been a terrific partner, but again, there's competition in that category as well. And then the last is just our development, athletic development, and our ability to fundraise. And I think we've got a great message when we have the quality of student athlete that we do, and we can go to a potential donor and say, all right, your contribution, you're helping. You're helping propel these kids to have success, both athletically and academically. Yes?
So when I read all about your biography, everyone who talked about you said that you had shown 3 decades of faultless advice and leadership at ESPN. So, to better you up with that, what were some of the surprising failures of that industry over the 30 years?
Oh, at ESPN? Our biggest failure was ESPN the phone. We probably launched that must have been probably about 8 years ago. And it was literally a handset phone. We were going to get into the phone business. And, if you're a sports fan, you're going to want ESPN the phone. And it'd have access to the internet, and you could stream our games live. The quality of that stream, the video stream, was awful. And we totally misread it, because to market when you're going up against the Verizons of the world, we were just we quickly realized, oh, this was a mistake. And so we got out of the hardware business, and we realized what we are is we're a content business. What we ultimately did is we created content and actually licensed that to the wireless companies. So we kind of went back to our core competency, which was content. So that's clear. That's the biggest failure we had. But we learned from it, and I think the one thing is when you're in a situation like that, realize it, come to grips with it quickly. All right? If something's not going to work, figure it out. Swallow your pride and say, hey, we're getting out of this. If it's not going to work, don't try to prolong it. Yes, sir.
You mentioned there are about 600 student athletes
Mhm.
in Syracuse. Are they all on scholarship, or what is the distribution?
Not all, because the NCAA, they quantify by sport the number of scholarships that are available, and then we parse that out through the individual sports. It's a complicated metric. In the back? Is there a question in the back?
Well, I don't know if it's this or not, but I'm kind of amazed by the arbitrary dictatorial power the NCAA has in picking on a certain college and saying, you did something wrong, we're going to do this and that, we're going to penalize you in scholarships. Others apparently fly under the radar. The latest one in the news was that Louisville, for its transgressions, was let off lighter than Syracuse was a couple of years ago on the basketball fiasco. Any comments on just how does NCAA get this dictatorial power and keep it without somebody saying, wait a minute, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's been part of the association, and the conferences have agreed for decades that part of the NCAA's part of their job is to legislate infractions within the ranks. I can't comment on I wouldn't comment on Louisville or any other case. Would be inappropriate for me to do so. It's ironic, because Carrier was the first naming deal of its kind when it was done in 1970. This was something that really was, tremendous out of the box thinking.
But when you figure from 1979 or 80 to where it is for these amount of years, for what it is, I mean, they've more than got.
It's been a pretty good deal for Carrier.
I understand. Any more questions?
No, but I know a new show we're going to create.
Thank you for coming out. We will be back in September 9th or 13th, I forget. please look for the notices, and thank you, John Wildhack.
Thank you, and thanks for your support. Thank you.